He was the king of Wall Street. She was the girl from nowhere. At their lavish Hamptons wedding in front of the Vanderbilts and the Astors, he looked at her simple handmade dress and laughed. He called it a rag, a disgrace to his name. But he didn't know the secret stitched into its seams, a secret worth not millions but billions. What happens when the laughter dies, and the world learns that the woman he just humiliated could buy and sell his entire legacy with the stroke of a pen? Her revenge wasn't just coming. It was already served. The air at the Sebenak Golf Club in Southampton was thick with the scent of money salt and the delicate perfume of 1,000 white hydrangeas. It was the rarefied air of the 0.01%, a climate-controlled atmosphere where fortunes were murmured into existence over gin and tonics, and legacies were as meticulously manicured as the putting greens that rolled toward the glittering Atlantic. Today, that air was also crackling with the high-voltage electricity of a major social event, the wedding of Alaric Vaughan, the 34-year-old wunderkind of Wall Street, to a woman no one had ever heard of, Ada Waverley. Alaric Vaughan was not merely a man. He was a brand, a myth in the making. With a sharp jawline that looked engineered for success and a smile that could close a billion-dollar deal or break a heart with equal chilling ease, he was the closest thing to royalty America had. His firm, Vaughan Capital, was a gleaming predator with its tentacles wrapped around every significant market from New York to Hong Kong. He didn't just participate in the market, he moved it. And today, in front of God and Stephen A. Schwartzman, he was capturing his most mysterious prize. The guest list was a testament to his power, a meticulously curated ecosystem of influence. Schwartzman. The Blackstone Titan himself held a crystal glass of champagne, speaking in low, confidential tones to a senator whose campaign Vaughan Capital had generously supported. Across the lawn, near a cascading ice sculpture of a swan, a few scions of the Lauder family chatted with a revered art collector, their laughter tinkling like the diamonds at their throats. This wasn't a wedding. It was a consolidation of power, a celebration of Alaric's gravitational pull in the universe of the ultra-wealthy. And then there was Ada. She stood near the grand arch of white roses where the ceremony would soon take place, a solitary, quiet figure in a world of glittering, performative magnificence. She was beautiful, undeniably so, but her beauty was of a different dialect than the one spoken here. It was the quiet, unassuming beauty of a wild flower in a hothouse of genetically engineered orchids. Her hair, a cascade of dark chestnut, was simply tied back with an ivory ribbon, and her face, devoid of the heavy, sculpted makeup favored by the other women, was luminous with a nervous, genuine excitement. But it was her dress that caused the whispers, the subtle, venomous static beneath the string quartet's melody. In a sea of Vera Wang, Oscar de la Renta, and custom Giambattista Valli. Ada's dress was an act of quiet, baffling rebellion. It was simple, devastatingly, unforgivably simple. Made of a soft, unadorned ivory silk that flowed around her like liquid moonlight, it had long fitted saloparts and a modest, graceful neckline. There was no beading, no lace, no dramatic 20-foot train. It was beautiful, but it was the kind of austere beauty one appreciated in a museum, not on the bride of Alaric Vaughan. It was an understatement in a world that abhorred the very concept. "Is that it?" whispered Beatrice Ellington, a real estate heiress whose own wedding dress had once been featured in Vogue for its sheer audacity and carat count. She fanned herself with the heavy cardstock of her program, her diamond-encrusted bracelet catching the afternoon sun. "It looks homemade." The word was pronounced as if it were a terminal illness. Her companion, a smirking banking heir named Carter Hayes, Alaric's best man, snorted softly into his champagne flute. "I heard she's from somewhere in Oregon. Probably grew the silkworms herself and bartered for the thread with a bundle of firewood." The snickers spread like a contagion through the perfectly coiffed crowd. The dress was a statement, but no one could decipher what it was trying to say. It was a blank page in a library of ornate leather-bound tomes, and it was making them all deeply uncomfortable. From across the lawn, Alaric's mother, Meredith Vaughan, a woman sculpted from ice and ambition, glided towards her son. Her own gown was a masterpiece of silver embroidery, a testament to her status, and her necklace, the famed Vaughan diamonds, glittered malevolently at her throat. She moved with the predatory grace of a shark, and she had scented blood in the water. "Alaric, darling," she began, her voice a silken weapon that could strip flesh from bone. "A word. Have you seen her dress?" Alaric was holding court with a group of his partners from the firm, laughing the picture of a man on top of the world. He turned his eyes, scanning the crowd with proprietary warmth until they landed on his bride-to-be. His smile faltered just for a second, a barely perceptible glitch in his polished programming. He had seen the dress before, of course. A week ago, in the privacy of their penthouse overlooking Central Park, she had shown it to him, her eyes shining with pride. He'd barely glanced at it, distracted by a conference call with Tokyo. He'd assumed it was a preliminary sketch, a muslin mock-up. He hadn't in his wildest dreams imagined this was the final product. "It's minimalist," he said the word, tasting foreign and unpleasant on his tongue. He was a man of maximalist tastes, bigger deals, faster cars, taller buildings. Minimalism was a disease of the poor. Meredith's lips tightened into a bloodless line. "It's a dishcloth, Alaric. An expensive silk dishcloth, perhaps, but a dishcloth nonetheless. The photographers from Town and Country and Vogue are here. What are they supposed to photograph? The purity of her intentions. Your project of turning a country mouse into a city socialite is far from complete, it seems." The barb hit its mark. Alaric's jaw clenched. He had built his empire on the bedrock of perception. Image was everything. His parties, his acquisitions, his women. They were all meticulously chosen extensions of the Alaric Vaughan brand. And his bride, the ultimate acquisition, was wearing a dress that looked like it cost less than the floral arrangements. He felt a surge of hot, violent anger. It was an act of defiance, an act of disrespect. Ada, for her part, seemed oblivious to the growing storm of whispers. She was speaking with the only person she truly knew there, a kind-faced, impeccably dressed woman in her 60s named Martha, who had been her guardian for most of her life. Martha, in her simple but elegant navy suit, was a small island of warmth in this cold sea of judgment. "You look breathtaking, my dear," Martha said, her voice a soothing anchor. "It is exactly as you designed it. Your mother would be so proud." "Thank you, Martha," Ada replied, her smile radiant and genuine. "It feels right. It feels like me." Just then, Alaric excused himself from his partners, his own smile now a tight, dangerous baring of teeth. He began to walk towards Ada. The crowd watched, a palpable sense of anticipation rippling through them. The pre-show entertainment was about to begin. This was better than the stock market. This was a hostile takeover of a wedding. As he approached, Ada's face lit up, her love for him so nakedly apparent. It was almost painful to watch. The change in her was instantaneous and absolute. Her posture softened. Her eyes shone, her entire being oriented itself towards him, like a flower to the sun. "Alaric, is it time?" He didn't smile back. His eyes, the color of a stormy sea, raked over her, from the simple knot in her hair down to the hem of the plain, offensive dress. The light in Ada's expression flickered, dimmed, and was replaced by a small, furrowed line of confusion. This was not the adoring gaze of her fiancé. This was the cold assessment of a disappointed CEO. "What is this, Ada?" he asked. His voice was low and tight, meant only for her, but carrying the unmistakable weight of public condemnation. "What is what?" she asked, her hand instinctively going to the soft silk of her gown, a gesture of protection. "It's my dress. Do you like it?" "No," he said, stepping closer, his tall frame casting a shadow over her. "This is a joke. Is your real dress coming? Are you planning some sort of dramatic late entrance? Because this little stunt is not amusing." Her heart began to beat, a painful, heavy rhythm against her ribs. The ambient noise of the party seemed to fade into a dull roar. My real dress, Alaric. This is my real dress. I showed it to you last week, remember?" "I remember you showing me a piece of fabric. I thought it was a draft. I thought you were working with a designer. I offered to fly in Virginie Viard from Chanel. I gave you a black Amex with no conceivable limit, and you show up to our wedding." "My wedding?" he emphasized, in front of all these people wearing a bedsheet. "Do you have any idea how this looks? Do you understand what you've done?" The color drained from Ada's face. She could feel the collective gaze of the guests on her back, a physical pressure. She could see them out of the corner of her eye, the glint of their phones, the smirks on their perfectly lipsticked mouths. They were feasting on her humiliation. It's what I wanted," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. The dress had felt so right, so her. Now it felt like a costume of shame. "It has meaning to me." "Meaning?" he scoffed, and this time he didn't bother to lower his voice. He let out a short, sharp laugh that was utterly devoid of humor, a sound of pure, cutting derision. It echoed in the sudden quiet. What possible meaning could a plain rag like this have? "Did you make it in your quaint little village to save money? Is this some sort of passive-aggressive statement about the evils of capitalism? Because let me tell you, sweetheart, you are about to marry capitalism incarnate. You're about to become Mrs. Alaric Vaughan. And Mrs. Alaric Vaughan does not wear rags." He turned his head slightly, a deliberate theatrical gesture, just enough to catch the eye of Carter Hayes, who gave him a subtle approving nod. He was performing for them now. He was reasserting his dominance, showing them all that he was not diminished by this baffling beige woman. He was still the king, and the king would not be embarrassed. Tears welled in Ada's eyes, hot and stinging. The public cruelty was a physical blow. She had seen him be ruthless in business, had watched him eviscerate opponents on conference calls. She had told herself that was his armor, his work persona. But she had never ever believed he would turn that cold fury on her. The Alaric she knew, or thought she knew, was the man who brought her coffee in the morning, who held her when she had nightmares about losing her parents, who told her she was the calm in his storm, the only real thing in his life. This man, this stranger with the cruel eyes and the mocking smile, was not him. This was the real Alaric. The other was the facade. "Alaric, please!" she begged, her voice breaking on a sob she couldn't contain. "Don't do this. Not here. Not now." "Oh, here is the only place it matters." He shot back, his voice like a whip. "You wanted to make a statement with this dress, Ada. Well, congratulations, you've made one. You've announced to the entire world that you have no idea what it means to be a part of this family, of this life. You've embarrassed me, and you've embarrassed yourself." He didn't wait for a reply. He spun on his heel, a clean, dismissive motion, and walked back towards the altar. He signaled to the wedding planner with a sharp, angry gesture. "Let's get this farce over with." Ada stood frozen, the world dissolving around her into a painful, humming blur of pastel colors and cruel, staring faces. The love she had felt for him, so bright and overwhelming just minutes before, curdled in her chest. It was a swift, brutal death. The pain was immense, but as it crested, something else rose in its place. An incredible, absolute clarity. Martha rushed to her side, her face a mask of fury and concern. "Ada, my child, that man is a monster. We can leave, right now." But Ada barely heard her. The hot tears receded, and a strange, cold calm began to settle over her, extinguishing the fire of her pain. It was the calm of a general assessing a battlefield, of a CEO deciding the fate of a failing company. He thought this was about a dress. He thought this was about his reputation. He had no idea what this was about. She looked down at her hands, her fingers tracing the flawless, simple seam on her sleeve. Her mother had designed this. The note that had come with the fabric delivered by Martha had read, "For my Ada. May this dress remind you that true strength needs no adornment. It is woven within you." This dress wasn't a statement about capitalism. It was a statement about character. It was a legacy, a story, a secret she had planned to share with Alaric tonight, in the intimacy of their wedding night, as her ultimate gift of trust. A story that began not in a quaint village in Oregon, but in a world of unimaginable wealth that dwarfed his own. A world he had just trampled on with his designer shoes. He had judged the cover, and in doing so had forfeited the right to ever read the book. The flustered wedding planner scurried up to her, her clipboard trembling. "Miss Waverley, Mrs. Vaughan. It's time. The music is starting." Ada lifted her chin. She looked past the planner, her eyes locking onto Alaric, who stood at the altar, looking impatient, a king waiting for his defective tribute to be presented. He thought he had won. He thought he had put the little nobody from Oregon in her place. He had no idea that he had just signed the worst deal of his life. She took a deep breath, the salt-tinged air filling her lungs, cleansing them of her last shred of love for him. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and steady, all trace of a tremor gone. "It's time." And as she began to walk down the aisle across the perfectly manicured lawn towards the man who had just publicly shredded her heart, she was no longer a shy, nervous bride. She was the inheritor of a silent empire, and the war had just begun. Her simple dress was not a white flag of surrender. It was her armor. Ada's walk down that green aisle was a journey through a frozen moment in time. The sweet romantic strains of Pachelbel's canon, played by a string quartet flown in from Vienna, seemed to mock her. Each note was a crystalline shard of the beautiful future she had imagined now shattering around her. The faces in the crowd turned to watch her approach, a gallery of the world's most powerful people. She saw them not as individuals, but as a single entity of judgment. Beatrice Ellington's smug smirk, Carter Hayes's look of triumphant pity, Alaric's mother, Meredith, whose expression was one of cold, vindicated disdain. They were vultures, and she was the feast. With every step, the fiery pain in her chest cooled, hardening into something else. It was the alchemical transformation of love into purpose. The naive girl who had fallen for a charismatic titan was being burned away, and from the ashes a queen was rising. She had come to this wedding to join her life with a man. She now realized she was here to claim an empire. Her empire, and he was just the first acquisition. She kept her eyes locked on Alaric. He stood at the altar, a perfect specimen of power and privilege, but she could see the cracks in his facade, the impatience in the way he shifted his weight, the flicker of annoyance in his eyes that the farce was taking so long. As she drew closer, his expression changed. The confident anger gave way to a sliver of confusion. He was expecting tears. He was expecting a broken, humiliated bride he could graciously forgive in front of his audience. He was not expecting this woman, this stranger with a spine of steel and eyes that held the cold, clear light of reckoning. She reached the altar. Alaric took her hand. His grasp meant to be firm and possessive, but she felt the slight tremor in his fingers. His confidence was a performance, and he had just forgotten his lines. "Ada," he whispered, his voice a low, urgent hiss, searching her face for the woman he recognized. "Are you all right?" She met his gaze, her own expression unreadable. "I've never been better," she replied, her voice as crisp and cool as the evening air rolling in from the Atlantic. The warmth he was used to was gone, replaced by a polished chill. The officiant, a retired judge whose career had been made possible by Vaughan family connections, cleared his throat and launched into his well-rehearsed script. He spoke of love, of trust, of partnership, of two becoming one. The words were a bitter irony, hollow platitudes washing over Ada without leaving a mark. She stood perfectly still, a marble statue in a simple silk dress, her composure so absolute it was unnerving. When it came time for the vows, Alaric, recovering his footing, recited his with practiced theatrical ease. The words were beautiful, promising eternal devotion, a lifetime of protection, a partnership of equals. They were the words of the man she thought she was marrying, not the man who had called her dress a rag just moments before. He finished a confident smirk, returning to his face as if his eloquent lies could erase his cruel truths. Then the officiant turned to her. "Ada, do you have vows you would like to share?" She had them, of course. Vows she had written and rewritten, tear-stained pages, filled with promises of her own, full of hope and a deep, true love. She let them burn to ash in her memory. She looked directly at Alaric, her gaze so direct and unflinching that he involuntarily took a half step back. Ada," she began, her voice ringing out with startling clarity, each word a perfectly placed stone. "Take you, Alaric, to be my husband. I promise to give you exactly what you deserve." A ripple went through the first few rows. That wasn't in the script. Meredith Vaughan stiffened her eyes, narrowing. "I will honor the commitments we have made today," Ada continued, "and I expect you to do the same. I will be your partner in all things, in the way that I see fit. I will share with you my life, my future, and my assets." She paused on that final word, letting it hang in the air, charged with a meaning no one yet understood. "From this day forward," she concluded, her voice dropping slightly, "for as long as our contract shall last." Contract. The word landed like a gauntlet thrown down. Alaric's face tightened, a muscle jumping in his jaw. This was not the vow of a loving bride. It was the declaration of a hostile takeover. The stunned officiant, flustered quickly, prompted them. "The rings." Alaric's hand trembled as he took the platinum band and slipped it onto her finger. His touch was cold and clammy. When Ada took his ring, her hand was rock steady. She slid the ring onto his finger with a firm, final pressure. It was not a caress. It was a branding. "I now pronounce you husband and wife." The officiant rushed, his relief palpable. "You may kiss the bride." Alaric turned to her, his face a storm of anger and bewilderment. He leaned in, intending a possessive, punishing kiss to reassert his dominance. But Ada met him halfway, her lips pressed against his for a single, bloodless moment. There was no passion, no love, no submission. It was the cool, dry sealing of a deal, a corporate merger. The reception that followed was a masterclass in social tension. The opulent marquee, designed to foster celebration, felt like a courtroom. Guests clustered in small, anxious groups. Their laughter brittled their eyes, darting constantly to the bridal table, where Ada sat with the serene posture of a queen sipping water, while Alaric downed champagne like a man trying to extinguish a fire. He tried to play it off his charm on overdrive. "Quite the poet, my wife." He'd laugh to a guest who offered congratulations, his voice a little too loud. "Likes to keep me on my toes." But no one was buying it. They had all seen the public evisceration and the bride's chilling surgical response. After an hour of this suffocating performance, Ada excused herself. She glided through the room, feeling the stares like insects crawling on her skin. She wasn't headed for the dance floor. She had a meeting to attend. In the lavish powder room with its Venetian mirrors and bowls of floating gardenias, she found exactly who she expected to find. Meredith Vaughan stood with her arms crossed, a warrior queen surveying her domain. "What precisely was that?" she demanded, foregoing any preamble. "Our contract shall last. You turned my son's wedding into a laughingstock. You embarrassed him. You embarrassed this family." Ada met her gaze in the mirror, the reflection showing two formidable women, one fighting for a legacy, the other about to claim one. "I thought you'd be pleased, Meredith," Ada said, her tone smooth as polished glass. "Alaric made it very clear that this marriage is about perception, a business transaction. I was simply clarifying the terms of our agreement in a public forum so there would be no misunderstandings." Meredith was momentarily stunned by the audacity. "You are an ungrateful, manipulative little—" "Be very careful what you say next," Ada interrupted, her voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. She turned from the mirror to face her mother-in-law directly. "You operate under a series of assumptions, Meredith. About me, about my place in this world, about your own power. Every single one of them is wrong. You have no idea who I am. But you will, and you will regret this day." Before the furious Meredith could formulate a retort, the door opened, and Martha entered, her warm, intelligent face a stark contrast to the icy standoff. She assessed the scene in an instant. "Meredith," Martha said, her tone impeccably polite, but underlined with steel, "I believe the bride needs a moment alone, with her family." The emphasis on family was a clear, calculated dismissal. Meredith shot a look of pure venom at Ada, then gave a disdainful sniff and swept from the room, a galleon retreating from a battle it had unexpectedly lost. The moment the door closed, Ada's perfect composure cracked just for a second. She leaned against the marble vanity, the cold stone seeping through the silk. Martha was there immediately, her arms wrapping around Ada in a fierce protective hug. "Are you all right, my child?" Martha whispered. "That was difficult." Ada let out a shuddering breath, the breath she'd been holding since Alaric had first sneered at her dress. "He's worse than we thought, Martha," she murmured into her guardian's shoulder. "The cruelty. It was so easy for him. So natural." "Some men are like that," Martha said, her voice a soothing balm. "They build their empires on foundations of sand, and they are terrified of anyone who brings a single drop of water near it. They mistake kindness for weakness. It is a fatal flaw." She pulled back her eyes, serious, but shining with pride. "But the plan is in motion. Mr. Dubois confirmed everything an hour ago, just as you instructed. It's done." From her small, elegant clutch, Martha retrieved a slim, vintage Mont Blanc fountain pen. It was deceptively simple, black, with a single gold band. "Your father's," she said, softly, placing it in Ada's hand. The metal was cool and heavy. "He signed his first major deal with this pen, and his last. It seems fitting you should have it tonight." Ada closed her fingers around the pen. It felt like a scepter. It felt like a weapon. The last of her grief for the man she thought she loved solidified into resolve. "It's time, then." "It's time," Martha confirmed. "They are about to start the speeches. Alaric's best man is first. Then I will speak, and then the world changes." Ada took one last look at her reflection. The woman staring back was a stranger, forged in the fire of a single afternoon's cruelty. Her eyes were clear, her purpose absolute. The simple dress was her uniform. She was ready. She walked back to the bridal table and sat down, her movements fluid and confident. She placed her father's pen on the white linen tablecloth beside her plate, a deliberate symbolic act. Alaric leaned over his face, a mask of controlled fury, his voice a low growl. What the hell was that in the ceremony? And with my mother? "Do you think you can humiliate me and my family and get away with it?" Ada didn't look at him. She picked up the pen, her fingers tracing the elegant lines of its design. "This isn't about humiliation, Alaric," she said, her voice calm and measured. "This is about education." Just then, a loud clinking of a glass cut through the murmur of the room. Carter Hayes stood, that smug, punchable grin plastered on his face. "Friends," he boomed. Ada looked up, her gaze meeting Alaric's. A faint, knowing smile touched her lips. "And class is now in session." Carter Hayes hoisted his champagne flute, his face glowing with the smug sheen of inherited wealth and expensive liquor. He tapped the microphone, the sound echoing slightly, and a hush fell over the marquee. He was a man who loved an audience. "Friends, Vaughns, titans of industry," he began, his voice booming. "For those who don't know me, I'm Carter Hayes, and I've had the distinct pleasure and occasional terror of riding shotgun with this madman Alaric Vaughan since our days trying to figure out which fork to use at Wharton." A wave of practiced polite laughter rolled through the guests. Alaric grinned, leaning back in his chair, the picture of a king in his court. Ada sat beside him, still and silent, her face a serene mask. "We've seen it all," Carter continued, gesturing expansively with his flute. "All-nighters that turned into all-weekers. Deals that were dead on arrival until Alaric breathed fire into them, and parties that probably violated international law. This man doesn't just climb mountains, he builds them and then sells the naming rights." More laughter, this time more genuine. Carter had them. He turned his gaze, a predator spotting its prey, toward Ada. "And now he's conquered his final frontier marriage. To the lovely Ada." He paused, letting the name hang in the air as if it were a foreign object. We were all, shall we say, intrigued when Alaric told us he was settling down, and with such a sweet, simple girl from somewhere out west with lots of trees, I believe. He gave a theatrical wink. But I have to say, Ada, you've got spirit. His smile was a slash of condescension. And that dress, a bold statement. In a room full of peacocks, you've chosen to be a lovely, pure white dove. A testament to your thrifty roots, I'm sure. It's refreshing. We can all learn a thing or two about fiscal responsibility. He raised his glass higher. But don't you worry. We're all looking forward to Alaric teaching you how the other half, the better half, lives. To Alaric and his most ambitious project yet. To Ada. The insult, wrapped in the thinnest veil of a toast, landed with precision. The room fell into a tense, awkward silence before a few of Alaric's cronies began to applaud a cue for others to join in. Alaric, basking in the glow of his friend's backhanded tribute, threw his head back and laughed. He raised his glass, clinking it against Carter's, in a public affirmation. He was the master. She was the project. His to mold, his to improve. He had put her in her place, and now his court jester was confirming the new order. Ada's expression did not flicker. She did not look at Carter. She did not look at Alaric. She simply watched the bubbles rising in her water glass as if they held the secrets of the universe. When the applause died, the wedding planner stepped forward. And now, a few words from the bride's guardian, Miss Martha Jennings. A ripple of polite, almost pitying curiosity went through the room. Who was this woman? The keeper of the simple girl. Martha walked to the podium, not with the swagger of the powerful, but with a quiet, grounded dignity that was in its own way far more commanding. She adjusted the microphone, her calm eyes scanning the sea of jewels and judgment before her. She did not look at the crowd. She looked only at Ada, and a small, infinitely proud smile touched her lips. "Good evening," Martha began, her voice clear and steady, cutting through the ambient clatter. "I am Martha Jennings. For the past 20 years I have had the profound honor of being Ada's guardian. But my role was more than that. I am the executor of a promise made to two extraordinary people who believed that character was more valuable than currency." She paused. "Most of you here know Ada as Ada Waverly, the girl from Oregon. A simple story crafted for a simple, protected life. But life as we know is rarely simple. Her story did not begin in Oregon. It began in a world of profound silence, deep privacy, and immense generational responsibility." Her eyes swept the room, pausing for a fraction of a second on the table where Stephen Schwartzman sat with other financial heavyweights. Their polite, bored expressions were sharpening into focus, a subtle shift from social obligation to professional vigilance. Ada's family name, Martha stated, her voice resonating with the weight of history, is not Waverly, it is Vandeleur. It was as if the air had been sucked out of the tent, a collective sharp intake of breath. It wasn't a name from the glossy pages of Forbes or Vanity Fair. It was a name from the footnotes of history books, from the whispered legends of the world's oldest banking families. A name that meant a different stratosphere of wealth, one that didn't need to announce itself because it owned the airwaves. Alaric froze, staring at Martha. Vandeleur. He searched his memory. The name was a ghost, a myth. He'd heard it once in a hushed conversation in Zurich about a silent partner who had propped up a nation's currency. He'd dismissed it as folklore. Beside him, his mother Meredith had gone the color of her bone china plate. She knew exactly what the name meant. She knew it meant the Vaughan fortune was a rounding error. The Vandeleur legacy is not one of extravagance. Martha continued her voice, weaving a narrative that was rewriting the reality of everyone in the room. It is one of substance, of tradition. She gestured to Ada. This dress she wears tonight. Some of you have seen simplicity. We see history. It was designed by her mother, Isabel, an exact replica of the gown every Vandeleur bride has worn for over 200 years. The silk is not merely silk. It is a specific thread, lune de Lyon, hand-spun and woven at the original family mill in Lyon, a mill gifted to the Vandeleur by Napoleon Bonaparte himself. The mill produces this fabric once a decade. It is not for sale at any price. This dress is not a statement against wealth. It is the very definition of it. A fortune so vast it has no need for a price tag. The silence was absolute, now thick and heavy with the weight of revelation. Every eye was on Ada on the simple dress. It was no longer a rag. It was a relic, an artifact of a power so immense it was terrifying. Alaric stared at it, at the soft ivory glow, and felt a cold dread creep up his spine. This was the garment he had called a bedsheet. Ada's parents, Alistair and Isabel Vandeleur, believed that true character is forged in the crucible of normalcy, far from the gilded key of obscene wealth. Martha said, her voice softening with memory. In his final letter, Alistair wrote, "Let her find a partner who sees the light in her soul, not the gold in her vault." After their tragic passing, I honored that wish. I raised Ada in seclusion to allow her to become a woman of substance before she took her rightful place as a woman of means. Her gaze, now hard as diamond, fell on Alaric. It appears they were wise to be cautious. The blow was surgical. Alaric flinched, the public rebuke stinging more than any financial loss. But, Martha announced, her voice rising with purpose, Ada's period of quiet is over. As stipulated in her father's trust upon her marriage, she formally assumes control of the entire Vandeleur estate, an estate managed through a private holding company, structured for absolute discretion. She paused, letting the suspense build until it was unbearable. She delivered the final fatal words. A company some of you may know by its operational name, Ethelred Holdings. This time the reaction was audible. A roar of shock, of disbelief. Ethelred Holdings, the ghost in the machine. A predator fund that moved with the stealth and lethality of a phantom submarine, acquiring companies, shifting markets, its ownership a complete mystery. It was the stuff of Wall Street horror stories. And it was her. As if on cue, the lights in the marquee dimmed, and the large video screen behind the bridal table, which had been displaying a tasteful monogram, flickered to life. The severe silver-haired face of Jean-Luc Dubois filled the screen. The skyline of Zurich, precise and orderly, was framed behind him. The air grew 10 degrees colder. "Good evening," Dubois said, his French-accented English clipped and emotionless. "I am Jean-Luc Dubois. For 20 years I have had the honor of serving as chairman of the board for Ethelred Holdings, awaiting this very day." Alaric felt the blood drain from his face. He was going to be sick. He knew Dubois. Everyone knew Dubois, the most feared and respected corporate lawyer in Europe, a man who didn't negotiate. He issued terms of surrender. On behalf of the board, Dubois continued, his eyes like chips of granite. "I am here to ratify Madame Vandeleur's first official act as our new principal." In her own words, A wedding should be marked by a meaningful gift. His gaze seemed to penetrate the screen and lock directly onto Alaric. As such, 1 hour ago, Ethelred Holdings completed 2 significant transactions. First, we acquired a 90% controlling stake in the Banque de Genève Privée. Alaric's hand shot out to grip the table, his knuckles white. His primary lender, the bank that held the paper on nearly every leveraged deal that had built Vaughan Capital. He wasn't just in debt, he was in her debt. Second, Dubois went on relentlessly. We have completed the acquisition of a 51% stake in Titan Industries. The sound in the room was a collective roar of disbelief and understanding. Titan Industries. Alaric's wail. The hostile takeover that was meant to be his crowning achievement. For a year, he had been battling a mysterious, infinitely deep-pocketed rival bidder who thwarted him at every turn. He turned his head slowly, mechanically, to look at his wife. The rival was her. The entire battle had been a game to her. Dubois's final words were delivered with the cold precision of a guillotine. Banque de Genève and Titan Industries now fall under the portfolio of Ethelred Holdings. All operational authority for both now rests with our principal, Madame Vandeleur. He gave a slight, formal bow of his head. Congratulations on your wedding, Madame, and welcome to the helm. The screen went black. A maelstrom of activity erupted. Reporters in the back were shouting into their phones. Carter Hayes looked like he'd seen a ghost. Meredith Vaughan was clutching her chest, her face the color of ash. And Alaric. Alaric Vaughan, the king, sat utterly incandescently broken. He slowly turned his head to look at his wife. The woman he had mocked, belittled and humiliated. She wasn't his project. She wasn't his accessory. She was his owner. Ada met his empty stare, her expression one of pure, unadulterated power. She serenely picked up her father's pen from the table, its gold nib glinting like a shard of ice in the candlelight. As I said, Alaric, she said, her voice a soft, devastating whisper that only he could hear. Class is now in session. Your education begins now. The aftermath of Dubois's message wasn't chaos. Chaos is messy, undirected. This was a precise, controlled demolition. The low hum of whispers instantly ceased, replaced by the sharp, distinct sounds of a world reordering itself, the clink of a fork dropping onto a plate, a choked gasp from a society columnist, the frantic, silent tapping of thumbs on screens as brokers were summoned and portfolios checked. Every person in that tent who mattered understood that the ground had not just shifted beneath their feet. It had been replaced by a chasm, and Ada Vandeleur was standing calmly on the other side. Alaric remained in his chair, but the world had tilted on its axis, and he was sliding off. The face of Jean-Luc Dubois, the boogeyman of European finance, was seared into his vision. His lender, his takeover target. A two-pronged attack executed with such brutal, silent efficiency, it was almost beautiful. He felt a wave of nausea. He looked at Carter Hayes, who was staring at him, mouth agape, the smugness wiped from his face, replaced by a primal fear. His mother Meredith looked as if she had aged a decade, her hand still clutching the Vaughan diamonds at her throat, as if to ensure they were still real. They felt cheap now. Everything felt cheap. Slowly, as if moving through deep water, Alaric pushed back his chair. The scrape of its legs on the polished floor was obscenely loud in the tomb-like silence. He rose his bespoke suit, suddenly feeling like a straitjacket. He had to get to her. He had to fix this. Everything in his life was a negotiation, a deal to be made. This had to be the same. He was Alaric Vaughan. He didn't lose. He walked toward her, his path clearing as guests scrambled to get out of his way, not out of respect, but as if he were a contagion. His mind raced, cycling through a Rolodex of strategies. Grovel, apologize, threaten, seduce. The dealmaker's brain was whirring, but the code was corrupted. The data was all wrong. He was operating on a faulty premise that he held any cards at all. He stopped before her, a supplicant before a queen. Ada hadn't moved. She sat with the serene posture of a monarch, the vintage Mont Blanc held loosely in her fingers. She looked up at him, and her eyes held no anger. They held nothing but a profound, chilling clarity. "Ada," he began, his voice a raw, unfamiliar rasp. "Baby, I had no idea." He reached for her hand, a desperate, instinctual gesture to reclaim some piece of the woman he thought he knew. She drew her hand back, a small, simple movement that was more effective than a slap. The rejection was absolute. "That is the point, Alaric," she said, her voice level. "You had no idea. You didn't care to know. When you looked at me, you didn't see a person. You saw a blank canvas on which to paint your own masterpiece, a project, as your friend so aptly put it." "No, that's not true. I love you." The words burst from him loud and hollow. In his own ears they sounded like a desperate lie. This is incredible. Ada, think of what this means. What you have, what we now have. We can be unstoppable, Vaughan. Capital and Ethelred Holdings, together. No one could touch us. This is the biggest deal of our lives. He was trying to sell her, to pitch her on a future he had just tried to build on her humiliation. The arrogance was so ingrained he couldn't see the absurdity of his own words. A small, sad smile touched Ada's lips, a fleeting ghost of pity. "There is no we, Alaric," she said softly, but each word was a hammer blow. "You shattered that possibility an hour ago when you chose your ego over my heart, when you decided that the opinion of these people," she gestured vaguely at the stunned crowd, "mattered more than the woman you were about to marry. The real Alaric Vaughan is the one who laughed at this dress, the one who values a brand above a person. I was an idiot, a fool. I'm sorry," he pleaded, his voice cracking, the desperation raw and ugly. "I was performing for them, for my mother. It wasn't real. Please, Ada, let me make it up to you. Let me prove it." "There is nothing to fix," she said, her calm unwavering. "The damage is done, and it was instructive. Now there are only new terms. Our marriage will continue for now. Appearances, as you know, are everything." Her eyes flickered with a cold fire. "You will be the devoted husband. You will smile for the cameras. You will fetch my wrap when I am cold. You will play your part flawlessly." She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping into an intimate, terrifying whisper. "And in return, Vaughan Capital will continue to operate. You will retain your title as CEO. You will keep your corner office for now. But you are CEO in name only. Every significant decision, every hire above a certain salary grade, every acquisition, every press release will cross my desk for approval. My desk, Alaric. You are no longer the king of your company. You are its highest paid employee, and you work for me." The finality of it crushed him. It wasn't a negotiation. It was a verdict delivered without malice, but with the unassailable weight of fact. This was the new reality. He could feel the eyes of everyone on him. Alaric Vaughan, the master of the universe, was being neutered in front of the very world he had conquered. A last pathetic flicker of his former self sparked within him. "And if I don't?" he whispered the question, tasting of ash. Ada's expression hardened, the last vestiges of softness vanishing. She held up the pen, its gold nib glinting like the tip of a dagger. "If you don't," she said, her voice deadly quiet, "then Mr. Dubois, at my command, will issue a margin call on every dollar of debt held by Banque de Genève tomorrow morning at 9:01 a.m. Not just for Vaughan Capital, but your personal lines of credit as well. I will liquidate your assets. I will dismantle your company piece by piece and sell the remnants to your most hated rival for $1. And you will be left with nothing but this suit and the global public memory of how your bride in her simple handmade dress dismantled your entire world because you were cruel to her." She placed the pen down gently on the table. "The choice," she finished, "is yours." He stared at her, the woman he thought he knew, the woman who was a complete and terrifying stranger. A goddess of vengeance in an ivory silk gown. He was trapped, checkmated in a game he never even knew he was playing. He had mocked her dress and handed her the sword to sever his own puppet strings. His world wasn't just collapsing. It had already been conquered and occupied. The fight went out of him. The air left his lungs in a shuddering sigh. His shoulders, which had always been squared with the arrogance of a conqueror, slumped in defeat. Slowly, defeatedly, he nodded, a single jerky motion of utter surrender. Ada watched him for a moment longer, her face unreadable. Then she stood, her movements graceful and deliberate. She turned away from her broken husband and addressed the stunned, silent crowd. "Thank you all for coming," she said, her voice projecting a calm authority that filled the vast tent. "My husband and I are very grateful for your good wishes. Please enjoy the rest of the evening." She then turned not to the dance floor, but towards the wide, moonlit exit, with Martha falling into step just behind her. The guests parted like the Red Sea, their faces a mixture of terror and rapt fascination. She didn't look back. The king was dethroned. The jester was in his place. And the queen in her simple silk dress had just begun her reign. So the wedding is over, but the marriage has just begun. Alaric Vaughan got the billionaire bride of his dreams, but at a price he never imagined his freedom. He's trapped in a golden cage, a CEO who has to ask his wife for permission, a husband who is nothing more than an employee. Ida Waverley, now Vandeleur, proved that the ultimate power isn't loud, flashy, or covered in diamonds. It's quiet, it's patient, and it wears a simple dress. What do you think will happen next? Will Alaric ever earn back a shred of respect? Or is he destined to be her puppet forever? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this story of epic revenge, make sure to hit that like button. Share it with someone who loves a good drama. And please subscribe to the channel for more stories where the underestimated come out on top.
A single sentence can shatter a world. For Isabella Rossi, that sentence was uttered over a $400 plate of seared scallops she couldn't afford by a man she thought she loved. He leaned back in his plush leather chair, swirling a glass of vintage Bordeaux, and smiled a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Honestly, Izzy," he said, his voice a polished blend of pity and condescension, "this little coding project of yours, it's a cute hobby, but it's time to be realistic. It's never going to be your career." He didn't know that in 6 weeks, that cute hobby would make her the youngest self-made female billionaire in the country. And he definitely didn't know that the first thing she'd do with that power was buy the very company he was desperate to become a partner in. His world was about to be shattered, and she was the one holding the hammer. The restaurant was called Aurelia, a name that dripped with the kind of old-world money that Brendan Cole was born into, and Isabella Rossi had only ever observed from the outside. It was all dark mahogany, hushed conversations, and waiters who moved with the silent, ghostly efficiency of men who were paid to be invisible. This was Brendan's world. He thrived in it, navigated it with an inherited ease that Isabella, for all her ferocious intelligence, could never quite replicate. She felt the familiar prickle of being an imposter. Her dress, a simple but elegant navy sheath, had cost a week's salary. Brendan's suit, a bespoke piece from Savile Row, probably cost more than her car. They were celebrating his latest promotion at Sterling Wakefield, the private equity firm where his father was a senior partner. Brendan was now a vice president, another gilded step on a path that had been paved for him since birth. To the future, Brendan toasted, clinking his crystal glass against hers. And to you finally leaving that dead-end job at Innovatech. Isabella stiffened. It's not a dead-end job, Brendan. It's a stepping stone. And Project Chimera is... He cut her off with a placating wave of his hand. I know. Project Chimera. Your AI algorithm. It's brilliant, I'm sure. For an academic paper. But a real-world application. The market is brutal, Izzy. It's dominated by giants. Google, Goldman Sachs. They have armies of PhDs working on this stuff. And I have something they don't, Isabella countered, her voice low but firm. My model is different. It's not just predictive, it's adaptive. It learns from market sentiment, not just historical data. It can anticipate black swan events with a 7% higher accuracy rate than anything currently on the market. She had spent 3 years on it. 3 years of sleepless nights fueled by cheap coffee and an unshakable belief in her own code. It was her life's work, hidden away on a private server running simulations that were yielding results so spectacular they frightened even her. Brendan sighed, the sound of a patient parent explaining the world to a naive child. Listen to yourself. It sounds wonderful, but who's going to fund it? Who's going to take a chance on a junior analyst from a mid-tier tech firm? I'm just trying to protect you. My father has already spoken to a contact at Sotheby's. They're looking for an art history consultant. With your eye, you'd be perfect. Less stress, great connections, you can travel with me. The blood drained from Isabella's face. Art history. She had a master's degree in computational finance, another in artificial intelligence from Stanford. He was suggesting she abandon it all to become a social accessory, an intellectually stimulating companion for his high-flying life. This was the moment, the final clarifying insult in a long line of them. It wasn't just that he didn't believe in her, he actively disdained her ambition. He saw it as a character flaw, an unsightly blemish on the otherwise perfect canvas of the life he had planned for them. You don't get it, she said, her voice barely a whisper. You have never not once tried to understand what I do. Because I understand how the world works, he retorted, his patience finally snapping. The polished veneer cracked, revealing the raw arrogance beneath. It works on power, on connections, on capital, not on some fantasy algorithm you built in your spare time. It's a cute little project, Izzy. A hobby. Now let's be realistic. Focus on us. Focus on a life that's real. That was the sentence, the one that echoed in the cavernous silence that followed. A cute little hobby. Isabella looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in months. She didn't see the handsome, charming man she had fallen for. She saw a gatekeeper, a man whose entire identity was built on a foundation of inherited privilege, terrified by the thought that someone, especially a woman he was supposed to possess, could build her own empire from scratch. Slowly, she placed her napkin on the table. She stood up, her movements deliberate and calm. The entire restaurant seemed to fade into a blur. You're right, Brendan, she said, her voice clear and devoid of emotion. It's time for me to be realistic. He smiled, relieved. Good. I knew you'd see it my way. My realism, she continued, picking up her small clutch from the table, is that I am sitting across from a man who is so profoundly insecure that he has to belittle my life's work to feel powerful. My realism is that I have wasted 2 years of my life with someone who sees me as an accessory, not a partner. And my realism, she took a deep breath, is that this is over. We are over. Brendan's face went from smug relief to crimson fury in a heartbeat. You're throwing this away for a fantasy. You'll come crawling back in a month when you realize you can't pay your rent. A ghost of a smile touched Isabella's lips. It was a cold, sharp thing. Don't hold your breath. She turned and walked away, leaving him sitting alone with 2 entrees, a £1, 200 a bottle of wine, and a look of pure, unadulterated shock. She didn't look back. As the cool night air of the city hit her face, she didn't feel heartbroken. She felt liberated. She felt angry. And more than anything, she felt a burning, all-consuming drive. He thought her work was a hobby. She was about to show him and the rest of the world just how powerful a hobby could be. The week following the breakup was a descent into a specific kind of hell. The emotional fallout was brutal, but it was the professional sabotage that blindsided her. Brendan, it turned out, was not a man who took rejection gracefully. He was a man who scorched the earth. Isabella arrived at her desk at Innovatech Financial on Monday morning to find her access card deactivated. Her direct manager, a perpetually stressed but generally decent man named David Chen, met her by the elevators with a pained expression. Isabella, Arthur Finch wants to see you. Now. Arthur Finch was the CEO of Innovatech. He was a relic of a bygone era, a man who wore suspenders unironically and believed innovation was something you bought, not cultivated. Isabella had met him twice in 3 years, both times in passing. His corner office felt like a museum exhibit on 1980s corporate power. Heavy oak desk, leather-bound books that looked untouched, and a panoramic view of the city that seemed wasted on him. Miss Rossi, Finch began, not bothering with pleasantries. It has come to my attention that you have been using company resources for an unauthorized personal project. Isabella's heart hammered against her ribs. Mr. Finch Project's chimera is a breach of your employment contract, he snapped. Article 7, Section B, all intellectual property developed using company time or equipment is the sole property of Innovatech Financial. You have been running this chimera on our servers, constituting a significant security risk and a flagrant violation of policy. Isabella was floored. With all due respect, sir, the core code was developed on my personal hardware. I've only been using the servers to run simulations against anonymized public domain market data. It poses no security risk whatsoever. David knows about my work. Finch waved a dismissive hand. Mr. Chen is not the one who signs your paychecks. We have also received a tip from a highly respected source in the financial community. A tip. She knew instantly who it was from. Brendan. He must have called Finch over a game of golf at their exclusive country club. He would have framed it as a friendly warning, a concern for Innovatech's security, all while painting Isabella as a reckless, untrustworthy employee. The tip suggests your algorithm is not only unauthorized but potentially unstable and could expose the firm to legal liabilities. It was a perfectly crafted corporate assassination, vague, impossible to disprove, and coming from a source whose credibility Finch would never question. That's a lie, Isabella said, her voice shaking with a mixture of rage and disbelief. My project is sound. The simulations are flawless. I'm not interested in your simulations, Miss Rossi, Finch said coldly. I'm interested in protecting this company. Your employment is terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you to your desk to collect your personal belongings. You will sign this non-disclosure and non-compete agreement. Our lawyers will be in touch. He slid a thick legal document across the desk. It was a gag order, and a professional prison sentence rolled into one. It would prevent her from working in AI-driven finance for 2 years and from ever speaking about Project Chimera. She stared at the paper, then at Finch's impassive face. This was it. Brendan hadn't just broken up with her. He was trying to break her spirit to cripple her career so thoroughly that his prophecy of her failure would come true. He wanted her to come crawling back not to him, but to the life he had prescribed for her. "No," she said. Finch raised an eyebrow. "I beg your pardon. I'm not signing it," Isabella stated, pushing the document back across the desk. "You are firing me based on a malicious and unsubstantiated rumor. You have no claim to my intellectual property, and I will not sign away my right to work." Finch's face hardened. "You are making a grave mistake, young lady. We will litigate. We will bury you in legal fees until you are bankrupt. Then I'll see you in court," she said, her voice finding a strength she didn't know she possessed. She stood up. "You don't need to have security escort me. I know the way out." The walk back to her desk was the longest of her life. The pitying stares, the whispers. She packed her small box, a photo of her parents, a worn copy of a book on neural networks, a lucky coffee mug. David Chen intercepted her by the door, his face etched with guilt. "Isabella, I'm so sorry. I tried to tell him. I showed him your progress reports. He wouldn't listen." "It wasn't your fault, David," she said, managing a weak smile. "Thank you for believing in me." "Your work. It's revolutionary," he whispered, looking around nervously. "Don't let them take it from you." That night, in her small, overpriced apartment, the full weight of her situation crashed down on her. No job, dwindling savings, the looming threat of a legal battle against a multi-million-dollar corporation. Brendan's words echoed in her ears. "You'll come crawling back," she cried, a gut-wrenching, soul-emptying sob that left her feeling hollowed out. She was alone, unemployed, and about to be sued into oblivion. For a few dark hours, she let the despair win. She scrolled through job listings for positions she was wildly overqualified for, just to feel a flicker of hope. Then, around 3 a.m., surrounded by takeout containers and a profound sense of defeat, something shifted. The image of Arthur Finch's smug face, of Brendan's condescending smile, ignited a different kind of fire. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about justice. It was about proving them all wrong. She wiped her eyes, walked over to her custom-built desktop computer, her one true luxury, and powered it on. The screen flickered to life, showing lines of pristine, elegant code. Project Chimera, her creation. They thought they could take it, bury it, and bury her with it. They had no idea what it was truly capable of. For the next 2 weeks, Isabella didn't just work. She waged a silent, one-woman war. She lived on coffee and protein bars. She disconnected her phone. She ignored the threatening letters from Innovatech's legal team that started piling up by her door. She poured every ounce of her energy, her genius, and her rage into the final evolution of her algorithm. She wasn't just running simulations anymore. She was preparing it for the real world. She refined the sentiment analysis module, feeding it terabytes of live news feeds, social media chatter, and political discourse. She strengthened the adaptive learning protocols, making the system so agile it could pivot its strategy in microseconds. She was building a weapon. One night, while running a final full-scale backtest against the last decade of market data, the results scrolled across her screen. The performance was staggering. If Chimera had been live during the 2008 financial crisis, it wouldn't just have avoided the crash. It would have shorted the market with such precision that an initial investment of $10,000 would have yielded over 50 million. It had predicted the dot-com bubble, the flash crash of 2010, every major market shift, with terrifying accuracy. She stared at the numbers, her heart pounding. This wasn't just a product, it was a paradigm shift. It was the key to a kingdom. But a key was useless without a door to unlock. She had the most powerful financial tool in the world and precisely $0 to implement it. Innovatech's lawsuit was coming. Her time was running out. She needed a miracle. She needed a backer with capital so vast and a risk appetite so huge that they would be willing to bet on a disgraced analyst against the entire financial establishment. She needed a ghost, and she knew of only one. A name whispered in hushed, reverent tones in the darkest corners of the tech world. A man who had vanished from public life a decade ago after his own legendary battle with Wall Street. A reclusive genius named Silas Black. Finding him was impossible. Contacting him was a fantasy. But for Isabella, fantasy was all she had left. Silas Black was more of a myth than a man. In the early 2000s, his company, Cassandra Data, had pioneered the very concept of algorithmic trading, making him a billionaire before he was 30. Then, after a brutal, hostile takeover attempt by a consortium of investment banks, an attempt he famously thwarted by liquidating their key holdings in a single afternoon, nearly crashing the Nasdaq in the process, he had simply vanished. He sold his company, took his fortune, and disappeared from the face of the earth. Rumors placed him on a private island in a fortified bunker in Wyoming, or even dead. Isabella only knew of him because of a single formative event in her academic life. During her master's program at Stanford, she had entered the prestigious Black Box Challenge, a hackathon for quantitative analysts. The anonymous sponsor of the challenge was legend, had it Silas Black himself. The goal was to design an algorithm that could find the signal in the noise of a chaotic dataset. Isabella didn't win, but she placed third. Her prize was a small scholarship and a cryptic email from a heavily encrypted address. It contained only one line. Good work. Most people miss the ghost variable. You didn't. Keep going. She had saved the email, a digital trophy from a faceless mentor. Now it was her only lifeline. With trembling hands, she composed a new message. It was a desperate shot in the dark, an electronic prayer sent into the void. She didn't beg or plead. She laid out the facts with cold, mathematical precision. Subject the ghost variable. Project Chimera. To encrypted address. You told me once to keep going. I did. I built Chimera. It's an adaptive, sentiment-driven predictive model. It anticipates black swan events by quantifying chaotic social and political data. The ghost variables the market ignores. Backtesting shows a 92% success rate in predicting major market shifts. Beta, 0.8 48 hours in advance. I have been fired from Innovatech Financial. They are attempting to steal the IP and are suing me into silence. My ex-boyfriend Brendan Cole of Sterling Wakefield instigated it. I have the most powerful financial algorithm in the world. I have zero capital and about 3 weeks until I'm legally and financially buried. You fought the banks and won. They are trying to do to me what they did to you. I am not asking for a handout. I am offering an opportunity. My algorithm, your capital. Together we can do more than just make money. We can break the system. Attached is the white paper for Chimera and a single time-locked prediction for a minor, obscure commodities future set to mature in 48 hours. Proof of concept. Isabella Rossi. She attached the files, her finger hovering over the send button. It was insane. He probably wouldn't even see it. The address was likely defunct. And if he did see it, why would he care? She took a deep breath and clicked. The email vanished from her outbox, swallowed by the infinite web. For a full day, there was nothing. Silence. Isabella's fleeting hope began to curdle back into despair. She started drafting replies to the want ads for data entry clerks. The next evening, as she was microwaving a cup of noodles, her burner phone, a cheap prepaid device she'd bought for cash, buzzed. An unknown blocked number. She almost ignored it. Hello, she answered, her voice wary. The voice on the other end was rough, gravelly, as if it hadn't been used for conversation in years. Miss Rosie, the ghost variable in the Palladium future was the sudden union strike at the South African mine. The news broke an hour ago. The future jumped 18%. Your prediction was off by 0.2%. Isabella's spoon clattered to the floor. It was him. It had to be him. How? She stammered. Your white paper is intriguing, the voice continued, ignoring her question. Ambitious. Arrogant even. I like it. Innovatech is a third-rate firm run by a fossil. Sterling Wakefield is a den of thieves. Brendan Cole is his father's son, all pedigree, no vision. I have followed your career since the Black Box Challenge. I knew you had potential. Isabella sank into a kitchen chair, her legs suddenly weak. He had been watching her. You have two problems, Miss Rossi, Silas Black said, his voice a low rumble. First a legal one, second a capital one. We will solve the legal problem with the capital problem. Be at the offices of Rothman, Geller and Sloan, 45th floor, tomorrow at 9 a.m. sharp. Ask for Mr. Geller. Do not be late. And Miss Rosie. Yes, she whispered. Welcome to the war. The line went dead. The next morning, Isabella walked into a law office that made Arthur Finch's look like a suburban dentist's waiting room. A silent receptionist led her to a conference room with a single occupant, a severe-looking man in his 60s with piercing blue eyes. This was Michael Geller, Silas Black's personal attorney, a man known in legal circles as the Shark. Miss Rossi, Geller said, motioning for her to sit. Mr. Black has been most emphatic. He has instructed us to resolve your situation with what he calls maximum prejudice. For the next 5 hours, Isabella was swept into a whirlwind. Geller and his team of lawyers dissected Innovatech's case with surgical precision. They laughed at the non-compete Finch had tried to force on her. This is unenforceable trash, Geller scoffed, tossing the document aside. Arthur Finch is about to learn a very expensive lesson about baseless litigation. Then came the bigger plan. It was audacious, terrifying, and utterly brilliant. Silas Black wasn't interested in funding a startup. He wasn't interested in a protracted legal battle. He was interested in retribution. Mr. Black doesn't just want to protect your algorithm. Miss Rossi? Geller explained, a predatory gleam in his eye. He wants you to have the platform to deploy it. The best way to end a lawsuit from a company is to own the company. Isabella stared at him. You want to buy Innovatech. Not buy it in the traditional sense, Geller corrected. Innovatech is a publicly traded company, albeit a small one. Its stock is undervalued, and its leadership is complacent. Mr. Black has authorized the creation of a shell corporation, Prometheus Capital, with a credit facility of $2 billion. Over the next 2 weeks, we will be quietly acquiring a controlling interest in Innovatech on the open market. It was a hostile takeover. But why? Isabella asked, bewildered. Innovatech is a dinosaur. The technology is outdated. Precisely, Geller said. It's a broken vessel, but it has the necessary infrastructure. The licenses, the regulatory compliance, the trading floor. It's cheaper and faster to buy the vessel and replace the engine than to build a new ship from scratch. And the engine is Project Chimera, and you, Miss Rossi, will be the new captain. The plan was set in motion with breathtaking speed, while Isabella worked with Geller's tech team to secure Chimera on unbreachable servers. A team of traders working from anonymous offices in Zurich and Hong Kong began buying Innovatech stock. They bought in small, untraceable blocks, careful not to trigger any alarms. The stock price began to creep up, but so slowly that market watchers attributed it to random volatility. Meanwhile, Arthur Finch, oblivious, was smugly proceeding with his lawsuit, burning through company cash, to harass Isabella with legal notices. Brendan Cole at Sterling Wakefield was likely celebrating his victory, confident that he had successfully neutralized his upstart ex-girlfriend. They were all celebrating on the deck of a ship that was unbeknownst to them being bought out from under their feet. 2 weeks later, Geller called Isabella. "We have it," he said, his voice calm but triumphant. "As of 5 minutes ago, Prometheus Capital owns 51% of Innovatech Financial's outstanding shares. According to SEC regulations, we are required to announce our position and can call an emergency meeting of the board to vote on new leadership. The meeting is set for Monday. Monday, the day of reckoning." Isabella felt a dizzying wave of vertigo. Just weeks ago, she was packing her belongings in a cardboard box. Now, she was the majority shareholder of the company that had fired her. "What do I do now?" she asked Geller. "Now," Geller replied, "you go buy a suit, Miss Rosie. The kind of suit that says, 'I own this room.' On Monday, you're not just getting your job back, you're taking his." The Monday of the emergency board meeting dawned grey and overcast, the sky a blanket of steel over the city. It suited Isabella's mood perfectly. She wasn't nervous. She was a live vein humming with a focused, cold energy she hadn't known she possessed. The suit Geller had advised her to buy wasn't just a suit, it was armor. A custom-tailored, charcoal grey pantsuit by a designer whose name she couldn't pronounce. It was understated, severe, and screamed power. She arrived at the Innovatech Tower at exactly 8:45 a.m., 15 minutes before the meeting. She wasn't accompanied by Geller's team. They were already upstairs preparing the ground. She walked in alone. The security guard at the front desk, a man who had watched her leave in disgrace weeks earlier, did a double take. "Miss Rosie, you're not on the visitor list." Isabella met his gaze without blinking. "I won't be a visitor for long. Call up to Arthur Finch's office. Tell them Isabella Rossi is here." She enjoyed the flicker of confusion and panic in his eyes as he made the call. She waited perfectly still, a statue of impending doom in the marble lobby. Upstairs, in the 50th floor boardroom, the atmosphere was one of confused irritation. Arthur Finch sat at the head of the long mahogany table, his face florid with indignation. The board members, a collection of aging men in expensive suits, murmured amongst themselves. The only outsider present was Brendan Cole, who Finch had invited as a special consultant to discuss market strategy, a thinly veiled reward for his tip-off. Brendan looked smug, relaxed, the cat that got the cream. "I still don't understand the meaning of this, Michael," Finch grumbled at Michael Geller, who sat calmly at the opposite end of the table with two junior lawyers. "An emergency meeting called by a shell company nobody has ever heard of, Prometheus Capital. This is a disruption of our quarterly planning." "All will be made clear, Arthur," Geller said smoothly. "We are just waiting for the new majority shareholder to arrive." A new majority shareholder. A ripple of shock went through the room. Brendan's smug expression faltered slightly. He leaned over to Finch. "Did you know about this?" he whispered. Finch just shook his head, looking bewildered. Just then, Finch's personal assistant burst into the room, her face pale. "Mr. Finch, sir, there's a woman here to see you. She's in the lobby. Isabella Rossi." The name hung in the air like a foul odor. Finch's face contorted in disbelief, then rage. What? What is that insolent girl doing here? Did she come to beg for her job back? Have security remove her from the building immediately." Brendan Cole laughed a short, ugly bark. "The audacity. Some people just don't know when they're beaten." Geller raised a hand. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, Arthur." "And why the hell not?" Finch sputtered. "Because, Geller said, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. "You would be removing the single largest owner of this company, the principal of Prometheus Capital, your new boss." The silence in the room was absolute, profound. You could have heard a stock certificate drop. The board members stared at Geller as if he'd just started speaking in tongues. Brendan Cole's face had frozen, his mouth slightly agape, the color draining from his cheeks. He looked like a man who had just seen a ghost. The boardroom doors swung open. Isabella walked in. She didn't look at Brendan. She didn't look at the stunned board members. Her eyes were locked on one person, Arthur Finch. She walked the length of the table with a steady, unhurried pace, her heels clicking a death knell on the polished hardwood floor. She stopped, not at the side of the table, but at the empty chair right next to Finch's at its head. She placed her leather portfolio on the table. "Good morning, gentlemen," she said, her voice cool and steady, amplified by the room's shocked silence. "Arthur, you're in my seat." Finch stared at her, his face a kaleidoscope of confusion, fury, and dawning horror. This is a joke, a prank." Geller cleared his throat. "It is my duty to inform the board," he announced formally, "that as of Friday, 17:00 hours, Prometheus Capital, a firm wholly controlled by Ms. Isabella Rossi, has acquired 51.7% of Innovatech Financial. All necessary filings have been submitted to the SEC. We have the votes. The first order of business for this meeting is a motion to remove Arthur Finch as Chief Executive Officer and Chairman of the Board, effective immediately." One of Geller's associates began passing out documents to the stunned board members. The numbers were all there in black and white, irrefutable. Brendan finally found his voice. It was a strangled, disbelieving whisper. "Izzy, how? What is this?" She finally turned her head and looked at him. There was no anger in her eyes, no hatred, just a vast, chilling indifference. It was the look one gives to a piece of furniture, a background object that has ceased to be of any importance. "It's called a hostile takeover, Brendan," she said simply, as if explaining a basic concept. "It's what happens when you underestimate your competition. You of all people should know that." She then turned her attention back to Finch, whose face was now a dangerous shade of purple. "The motion to remove Mr. Finch from his positions. All in favour?" Geller's hand shot up. Prometheus Capital votes aye with its entire 51.7% block. The other board members, seasoned veterans of corporate warfare, knew a lost cause when they saw one. Their loyalty was to their stock options, not to a deposed king. One by one, their hands went up. The vote was unanimous. Finch slammed his hand on the table. "This is an outrage, a travesty I built this company. You ran it into the ground," Isabella countered, her voice cutting through his tirade. "You relied on legacy systems, cronyism, and a fundamental misunderstanding of the future of finance. This company has been stagnant for a decade. That ends today." She looked at Geller. "Second motion. A motion to appoint Ms. Isabella Rossi as the new Chief Executive Officer and Chairwoman of the Board," Geller announced. Prometheus Capital votes aye. It was a formality. In the space of 10 minutes, Isabella Rossi had gone from being a fired, disgraced analyst to the absolute ruler of the company that had cast her out. She stood up and walked to the head of the table as Finch, sputtering with impotent rage, was gently but firmly escorted from the room by Geller's associates. She looked at the faces around the table, shocked, wary, fearful. "Let me be clear," she said, her voice resonating with newfound authority. "The era of complacency at Innovatech is over. We are no longer a follower. We are a predator. We will be implementing a new proprietary trading algorithm that will render every single one of our competitors obsolete. The name of that project is Chimera." She let the name sink in. "Some of you will adapt to this new reality. You will thrive. Those of you who resist change, who cling to the old ways, will be rendered redundant. Your positions will be eliminated." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the room until it landed finally on Brendan Cole. He looked physically ill, ashen-faced and trembling. "Oh, and Mr. Cole," she said, her voice laced with ice, "thank you for your consultancy. Your services are no longer required. Security will see you out." She watched as he was led from the room, not with rage, but with a kind of detached pity. He wasn't a villain anymore. He was just irrelevant. A footnote in her story. Isabella Rossi, 28 years old, stood at the head of the table in the boardroom of the company she now owned. She wasn't just the CEO. Thanks to the valuation of Chimera, which Silas Black's accountants had pegged in the low 10 figures, she was on paper the youngest self-made female billionaire in the nation. She looked out the panoramic window at the sprawling city below. It wasn't his world anymore. It was hers, and she was just getting started. The first 24 hours of Isabella's reign were a masterclass in controlled demolition and strategic reconstruction. The news of the hostile takeover and her appointment as CEO sent shockwaves through the financial industry. The headline in the Wall Street Journal read, "Fired an Analyst 28 buys company, becomes tech's newest billionaire." The story was sensational, but it barely scratched the surface of the silent, swift revolution happening inside the Innovatech Tower. Her first act as CEO was to call a company-wide all-hands meeting in the main atrium. The employees gathered a sea of anxious and curious faces. They were expecting a bloodbath. They were expecting a vengeful tyrant. Isabella walked onto the small stage, not with a cohort of lawyers, but alone. She wore a simple black dress, her hair pulled back. She looked young, almost startlingly so, under the harsh corporate lighting. She tapped the microphone, and a hush fell over the crowd. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady and clear. "My name is Isabella Rossi. As of yesterday, I am your new CEO. I know there are a lot of rumors and a lot of fear, so let's dispense with the mystery. Yes, I used to work here as a junior analyst. And yes, I was fired." A murmur went through the crowd. This was unprecedented honesty. "I was fired," she continued, "because I was building something new, something that the old leadership was too afraid or too blind to understand. That something is Project Chimera, and it is the future of this company, our future." She laid out her vision, not with corporate jargon, but with passion and clarity. She spoke of turning Innovatech from a lumbering dinosaur into a sleek, agile fintech predator. She spoke of innovation, of meritocracy, of rewarding talent over tenure. "For years, your ideas have been stifled by bureaucracy. Your talents have been wasted on outdated systems. That ends now," she declared. "I am not here to punish the past. I am here to build the future. If you are passionate, if you are talented, and if you are willing to work harder than you have ever worked before, you have a place here. If you are here to just collect a paycheck and wait for retirement, I suggest you update your resume." Then came the first of her gambits. "Effective immediately," she announced. "I am dissolving the entire senior management layer directly under the CEO. All departmental vice president positions are hereby vacated." Gasps rippled through the atrium. It was a corporate decapitation. "In their place," she continued, "I will be promoting from within, based on one criterion alone: merit. I've spent the last 3 years watching you work. I know who the real innovators are. I know who the dead weight is." Her eyes scanned the crowd and found a familiar, anxious face. "David Chen, where are you?" David, her former manager, looked terrified as he hesitantly raised his hand. "David," Isabella said, a genuine smile touching her lips for the first time. "You were the only manager who believed in my work. You protected it as long as you could. You understand what's coming. I'm promoting you to Chief Technology Officer. Your first task is to assemble a team to integrate Chimera into our core systems. You have an unlimited budget. Get it done." David Chen stood frozen for a moment, his face a mask of utter shock before a slow, dawning grin spread across it. A wave of energy, of possibility, surged through the employees. It wasn't a bloodbath. It was a revolution. Throughout the day, Isabella moved with ruthless efficiency. She walked the floors, not with an entourage, but by herself. She had quiet conversations with coders, with junior traders, with administrative assistants. She remembered their names, their projects. By day's end, a new leadership team was in place, comprised of the company's brightest and most overlooked talents. The old guard, the cronies of Arthur Finch, were gone. Late in the afternoon, her assistant, a sharp young woman she'd promoted from the reception pool, informed her she had a visitor. "A Mr. Brendan Cole is in the lobby. He insists on seeing you. He says it's personal." Isabella felt a flicker of something, not anger, but a weary finality. "Send him up," she said. Brendan entered her new office. Arthur Finch's old office, now stripped of its heavy dark furniture and replaced with minimalist glass and steel. And he looked like a broken man. His bespoke suit was rumpled. His face was pale and drawn. The swagger was gone, replaced by a desperate, hollowed-out look. "Izzy," he began, his voice raspy. I had to see you. I can't believe this." Isabella remained seated behind her vast new desk. She didn't offer him a seat. "Brendan, I came to apologize," he said, the words sounding foreign and clumsy in his mouth. "What I said, what I did, it was unforgivable. I was a fool. I was arrogant. And I was jealous." "Yes," Isabella agreed, her tone neutral. "You were." He took a step closer, his eyes pleading. "My father is... he's furious. Sterling Wakefield is one of Innovatech's biggest clients. He says I've ruined the relationship. I've been suspended. My career is over, Izzy." He was looking for something. Absolution, pity, a lifeline. He was trying to appeal to the woman. He thought he knew the Izzy who would be swayed by his pain, but that woman was gone. "Your career is not my concern, Brendan," she said, her voice as cool and hard as the glass of her desk. "You made a series of choices. You chose to belittle me. You chose to sabotage me. You chose to align yourself with a failing system because it was comfortable and familiar. These are the consequences of your choices." Tears welled in his eyes. "But we loved each other. Doesn't that mean anything?" Isabella leaned forward slightly. "You loved the idea of me, Brendan. You loved the version of me that fit into your world. The moment I tried to build my own world, you tried to burn it down. That isn't love. It's possession." She stood up, signaling the end of the conversation. "The work I am doing here is going to change the face of finance. I have a company to run. I'm afraid I don't have time for this." She turned and looked out the window at the city stretching out below her. It was a dismissal, more profound and complete than any firing. Defeated Brendan turned and walked out of the office, a ghost from a life she had already left behind. She heard the door click shut. She didn't turn around. She felt no triumph, no satisfaction, just a quiet, clean sense of closure. He was a problem that had been solved. Her phone buzzed. A text from an encrypted number. It was from Silas Black. "Geller tells me the old guard has been purged." "Good. Now the real work begins. Chimera is hungry. It's time to feed it. Don't get distracted by the noise. Your only loyalty is to the future." Isabella smiled. He was right. The past was settled. The future was a blank page, and she held the pen. The war wasn't over. It had just begun. The passage of 6 months had not just changed Innovatech Financial. It had forged it into an entirely new element on the periodic table of Wall Street. The old sleepy firm was a distant memory, a fossil preserved in amber. The new Innovatech was a place of breathtaking velocity, a symphony of quiet intensity. The open-plan floors, once a landscape of cubicle farms, were now collaborative pods centered around holographic data streams. The currency here wasn't tenure or titles, it was ideas and execution speed. Isabella had fostered a culture that felt less like a bank and more like a mission control center for the future of capital. A perfect example was playing out on the main screen in her office, a vast expanse of transparent aluminum that dominated one wall. It was 3:58 p.m., 2 minutes before the closing bell. Innovatech was in the midst of a silent, high-stakes duel with Goliath National Bank, the oldest and most arrogant titan of the industry, over a massive block of shares in a biotech firm that had just announced a breakthrough. Goliath's traders, using traditional models, were selling short betting. The announcement was a speculative bubble that would pop. Chimera, however, had seen something else. It had cross-referenced the clinical trial data with an obscure materials science journal, noting that the new drug's delivery mechanism relied on a polymer whose sole patent holder had just been quietly acquired by a tech conglomerate. It wasn't just a drug breakthrough, it was a vertically integrated manufacturing pipeline in the making. Chimera hadn't just seen the signal, it had understood the entire ecosystem around it. "They're still shorting," David Chen said, standing beside Isabella. He looked less like a TO and more like an excited kid with the world's best video game. "They think we're insane." "Let them," Isabella said, her eyes fixed on the cascading numbers. "Insanity is just a vision they can't comprehend yet." At precisely 4:00 p.m., the closing bell rang. A moment later, a news alert flashed across the wire. The tech conglomerate confirmed a multi-billion-dollar partnership with the biotech firm. The stock didn't just rise, it went supernova. Goliath National lost an estimated $900 million in a single afternoon. Innovatech, thanks to Chimera's foresight, had netted over $1 billion. It was just another Tuesday. This kind of success had made Isabella Rossi a legend, but it also made her a target. The industry, terrified of what it couldn't understand, began to fight back. Rivals tried to poach her staff with astronomical offers they all refused. Whispers of illegal insider trading circulated, prompting a discreet SEC inquiry that found nothing because there was nothing to find. Chimera wasn't cheating, it was just playing a different game entirely. The most persistent thorn in her side was a man named Nathan Pierce, a Pulitzer-winning journalist for the New York Ledger. Pierce was old-school cynical and smelled a rat. He didn't believe in magic bullets, and he saw Isabella as a financial warlock who needed to be exposed. His weekly columns were a masterclass in insinuation, painting her as a reckless gambler, a stooge for some hidden benefactor, or a fraud whose luck was about to run out. "The rise of Isabella Rossi and Innovatech isn't a fairy tale," he wrote in his latest piece. "It's a black box, and history teaches us that black boxes on Wall Street are never filled with miracles. They are filled with secrets, and those secrets eventually rot the entire system." Isabella read his column on her tablet as she sat in the back of her car, gliding through the city's neon-drenched streets toward her apartment. She should have been angry, but she mostly felt a strange sense of weariness. Pierce, like Brendan, like Finch, was another man trying to fit her into a narrative he understood. They couldn't accept that the phenomenon was simply a brilliant woman and her even more brilliant creation. The cost of this constant battle was her isolation. Her penthouse apartment was a marvel of minimalist design and smart home technology, a sterile paradise with views that could make an emperor weep. But it was also an empty fortress. Her friends from before her meteoric rise struggled to relate to her new reality. Dating was impossible, a minefield of sycophants and gold diggers. Her life had become her work, and her only true confidant was David Chen. It was during one of their late-night work sessions that the next chapter truly began. David had been running a deep learning protocol, allowing Chimera to search for patterns beyond the financial markets. The results he brought to her were staggering and terrifying. "It's not just supply chains, Isabella," he said, his voice hushed with awe. "It's everything. Based on massive atmospheric data, ocean temperatures, and deforestation rates, Chimera is predicting a catastrophic crop failure in Southeast Asia within 18 months, a famine that will affect 50 million people. It's also identified 5 coastal cities that are structurally unprepared for the sea level rise predicted over the next decade. It's mapping the future of human suffering." They stared at the data, at the cold, hard projections of impending disaster. All the money they had made, all the rivals they had crushed, suddenly felt meaningless. They had created a crystal ball, and it was showing them a vision of hell. "We can't just sit on this," Isabella whispered, the weight of the information pressing down on her. "We can't just use this to short agricultural futures. It's monstrous." This was the moment her ambition crystallized into purpose. The power they held wasn't for accumulating wealth, it was a tool for intervention. "We're going to create a new division," she declared, the idea taking shape with electrifying clarity. "A non-profit arm of the company. We'll fund it with 10% of Innovatech's quarterly profits. We're going to build early warning systems and give them to governments for free. We're going to preemptively invest in drought-resistant crops and fund their distribution. We're going to finance the seawalls those cities need before the floods come. We won't just predict the future, we'll protect it." They called it the Atlas Initiative, a name that signified the immense burden they were choosing to lift. The announcement of the Initiative was met with confusion by the street and cynicism by critics like Nathan Pierce, who dismissed it as a clever PR stunt to deflect regulatory scrutiny. But for Isabella, it was the only thing that mattered. A week later, a simple, unmarked cardboard box arrived at her office. There was no return address. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a single leather-bound first edition copy of a treatise on modern neural networks, the very book she had packed in her box on that humiliating last day at the old Innovatech. Tucked inside was a note on thick, cream-colored cardstock, the handwriting a strong, angular script. "Isabella, they will always mistake the architect for a gambler. They will always fear the tools they cannot comprehend. I once built a machine to see the future. I used it to win a war, and then I walked away. You have built a machine to save the future. Do not make my mistake. Do not walk away. The world needs its architects." The ghost in the machine is proud. SB. Isabella held the book, the heavy paper of the note cool against her fingers. It was more than an acknowledgement. It was a charge, a warning, and a blessing from the only person on the planet who could truly understand the path she was on. She looked from the book to the flowing data on the screens, then out the window at the city below. The journey had been forged in the fires of betrayal and humiliation. She had been dismissed, underestimated, and cast out. Brendan Cole was a faded memory, a cautionary tale. Arthur Finch and Nathan Pierce were just voices from an old world, their skepticism the dying echo of an obsolete era. Her story had never truly been about revenge. Revenge was a closed loop, a snake eating its own tail. Her story was one of creation, of building something where nothing existed before. She hadn't just bought a company, she had given it a soul. She had built an empire, not of money, but of purpose. And as she stood there, the architect of tomorrow holding a message from the ghost of yesterday, she knew with absolute certainty that her life's work, the cute little hobby that had sparked a revolution, was ready for its grandest, most important task. What an incredible journey of resilience, intelligence, and ultimate triumph. Isabella Rossi's story is a powerful reminder that your worth is never determined by someone else's inability to see it. Her refusal to be broken, her unwavering belief in her own vision, and her transformation of personal pain into world-changing power is an inspiration to anyone who has ever been underestimated or told their dream was just a hobby. What did you think of Isabella's epic comeback? Was her takeover ruthless or justified? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If you found this story as motivating as I did, please give this video a huge thumbs up and share it with someone who needs to hear that their ambition is valid and their dreams are worth fighting for. And of course, if you want more stories of incredible underdogs who change the game, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Thanks for listening.